I don't know if many of you remember this, but back in 2016, there was a creepy clown trend where people dressed as creepy killer clowns. They would hang out in places after dark or stalk people. My story takes place on my college campus during fall of that year. I lived with my grandparents before leaving for school, and I am extremely close to them. Also, I am very shy and had zero friends or people I regularly hung out with at school. I wanted to reach out and meet new folks, so I signed up for a salsa dancing club that met on Friday nights. I told my grandma over the phone, and she was happy I was putting myself out there. She asked if I was going with anybody. No, I told her. I'm just gonna go by myself. Are you sure? She asked. Don't any of your roommates want to go? The idea of talking to my roommates terrified me. I could handle structured gatherings, but personal conversations left more room for my awkwardness to creep in. No, they're not here, I replied. I don't want you walking around campus by yourself at night. I thought my grandma was just being overprotective. Grandma, it's fine. The streets are well lit, and it's only a 10-minute walk. It's perfectly safe. Well, if you're not going with anybody, call me and let me talk to you on the phone as you walk back. I agreed. That evening was incredibly fun, learning the basic steps and dancing to upbeat Latin tunes. At around 10:30, I felt ready to head back to my dorm, so I snuck out of the building and headed toward my dorm. Although the paved path I was walking on was lit by streetlights, it seemed darker than usual. In addition, the entire campus was deserted. Normally, there were quite a few kids my age wandering around, but that night there was not a soul to be seen. I dialed my grandma and made small talk with her as I walked. I took my heels off and carried them in my free hand. Now, the path I was walking on went past a stretch of sidewalk that was perpendicular to the one I was taking. Under one of the streetlights, about 10 meters away, I noticed a lone figure standing with its back toward me. The figure, hearing me chatting on the phone, slowly turned toward me. He was tall and heavy-set, with wild red hair, and appeared to be wearing light blue pajamas. His face was obscured by a killer clown mask. The mask was stark white with dark black eye sockets and a twisted, malicious grin. Time seemed to suddenly slow way down. The clown did not move toward me. He simply stood there, staring. I knew I had to think fast. I contemplated my options. I could A, scream like a little girl and run, B, approach him and confront him, or C, pretend he didn't scare me. The entire moment I just described couldn't have lasted more than a second, but in the moment, it felt like an eternity. Are you there? I heard my grandma say. Remembering to breathe, with the phone still at my ear, I decided to go with plan C. I broke eye contact with the clown. So anyway, I said loudly enough that the clown would hear me. Yeah, I'm on my way, I continued. What's going on? Is everything okay? I heard my grandma ask, her voice suddenly filled with anxiety. As confidently and nonchalantly as I could, I walked past the sidewalk where the clown was standing, continuing to chat. His head slowly turned as I walked past, watching me until I was out of sight. I ducked into the archway of the nearest building and tried the door, praying it was unlocked. It was. Once I was inside, I slumped against one of the concrete walls and broke down in tears. I explained to my grandma what had just happened. My grandma yelled for my grandpa to dial the campus police on his cell phone so that I could stay on the line with her. I got up and started pacing up and down the empty halls, checking every door and window to see if the psycho clown had followed me. Was he just a stupid kid doing this on a dare? Or was he someone with more evil intentions? Some of the creepy clowns in the news had axes or baseball bats. I had no idea if this clown was armed. When my grandpa tried to explain to the officer on the phone what happened and that I needed help, he told my grandpa, "Your granddaughter needs to make the call herself." Apparently, the reason I had to talk to them was so that they could be sure the call wasn't just a prank or some stupid reason like that. The point is that they wouldn't take my grandparents' word that I was in distress. I would have to hang up with my grandma and dial the campus police myself. Not knowing if I would survive the night, I told my grandma between sobs, "I love you. I love you too." My grandma was also crying. I dialed campus police and told them who I was and what had happened. The officer on the phone sent several other officers to find me, while I stayed on the phone with him and gave him a description of the clown. As I was talking, I heard a door open. I froze. Was the clown here? Did he find a way in? A tidal wave of relief washed over me as several officers came striding down the corridor. They walked with me back to my dorm. As soon as I was inside, I locked my door and window and I shut the blinds. I called my grandma back to tell her I was safe. After talking for a little while longer, we said goodnight. Since then, I've made a few friends at school. While I'm in a better place now, I don't go out alone after dark anymore. And as for that creepy clown, let's not meet again. This happened back in the late 1980s when I was home one summer on break from college. About 2 years prior, my dad had purchased an old house with the intention of eventually tearing it down to build a new home. The house was built in 1916, and like most homes built in that era, it had a really unconventional floor plan. There was a central living room and kitchen like any normal home, but the 3 bedrooms were more akin to separate apartments. Each had its own separate outside entrance, a private bathroom, and a door that led to the common area living room and kitchen. Perhaps the place was originally intended to be a boarding house or something? I really don't know. The other creepy thing about the house was that it was all wood. The ceilings, walls, and floors were all brown and nothing was ever painted or plastered. My dad was a pretty cool guy. While he was waiting for permits and financing, he let 3 of my friends live there for free in exchange for watching the place. They had a lot of parties, but my dad didn't care as long as none of the neighbors complained. I went to a few parties there myself when I was lucky enough to be home from college. Eventually, 2 of my friends moved out, leaving my one buddy there to watch the mostly empty house on his own. He was not the type of person to be afraid of living alone in a half-empty house, so he was fine with the situation. I was at home one afternoon when the phone rang. It was my buddy, and he sounded terrified. He told me to call the police and to meet him out in front of the driveway of the house, but under no conditions, go inside. I asked him why, and he frantically told me that there was a crazy clown in the house. Apparently, he was sick with the flu in bed for the previous 2 days. When he finally felt well enough to go into the kitchen to get something to eat, he ran face to face with a crazy woman dressed in a clown suit and makeup who started screaming at him. It was then that he ran out of the house and called me in a panic from a nearby gas station. I called the police and then drove over to the house, which was about 2 miles away. I found my buddy on the sidewalk out front and he was really shaken up. I asked him to describe what he saw and he kept saying that there was a crazy clown woman in the house. I asked for more specific details and he described her as dressed in a white clown suit with red makeup smeared all over her face. He was still a little sick, so he looked really bad, and honestly, he was really freaking me out as well. There was no way in hell that I was going to go into that house to investigate his story. After what seemed like an eternity, a cop showed up. My buddy told him the same exact story. The cop then went into the house while we waited outside. After about 5 minutes, he emerged escorting a crazy clown woman who looked exactly as my friend described her. She had wild, unkempt brown hair and was wearing this weird, baggy, one-piece, all-white body jumper suit. What was really disturbing, though, was her face. She had a tube of lipstick which she crudely spread red all over her cheeks in a failed attempt, I suppose, to make them look rosy. Although we were both freaked out, the cop thought it was hilarious. The clown woman claimed it was her house, and then accused us of being on drugs and trespassing on her property. When the cop told her to get in the back of his cop car, she warned him that she had powerful friends in Tinseltown who would have him fired. When he came back to talk to us, he told us he couldn't arrest her for breaking and entering because the house was already half abandoned. He said the best he could do was drive her a few blocks away and hope that she doesn't wander back. This, of course, freaked us out even more. Fortunately, though, when they ran a background check on her, it turned out she had an outstanding warrant and would be going to jail instead. That is the last time we saw her. When we went back into the house, we found all kinds of crazy stuff written on the kitchen cabinets in the same red lipstick she rubbed all over her face. There was also some 10-day-old fish in the fridge that my friend never got around to eating that she cooked on the stove and ate. The really scary thing, though, was that this crazy woman was in the same house with my friend for at least a day, while he was sick and semi-delirious in bed with a fever. She was probably harmless, but who knows what she would have done if she stumbled upon him while he was sleeping. His door was unlocked the entire time. Fortunately, she never did, as far as we know. One of the things she wrote on the cabinets in lipstick was her name. While I'm not allowed to disclose it here, I Googled it and found a mugshot that was taken of her some years later.